सिन्दूरारुणविग्रहा त्रिनयना माणिक्यमौली स्फुरत् तारानायकशेखरा स्मितमुखी मामीनवक्षोरुहा पाणिभ्यामलिपूर्णरत्नचषकम् रक्तोत्पलं बिभ्रतीं सौम्यां रत्नघटस्थरक्तचरणां ध्यायेत् परामम्बिकाम्। सान्निपातिकज्वर सततज्वर विषमज्वर ग्रह नक्षत्र दोषाञ्चान्या हर हर काली सर सर गौरी गम विद्ये आले माले काले बन्धे भज भज विद्ये मख मख विद्ये नाशय नाशय पापम् हर हर दुःस्वप्नम् विध्वंसय विध्वंसय विघ्नविनाशिनि रजनी सन्ध्ये बन्धुभिनादे मानस्तोषे मानसवेगे शङ्खिनी चक्रिणी वज्रिणी गदिनी शूलिनी अपमृत्युविनाशिनी विश्वेश्वरी द्राविडी केशवदैते पशुपति सहिते धीममर्दिनि गमनी कामिनी शबरी विराटी वाचक्री। ॐ द्रं 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 ॐ द्रं गुरु गुरु
Namaste, Suprabhatam. On behalf of Indica Yoga, the Global Festival of Yoga, it's my pleasure to welcome you all for this beautiful morning, where we are going to have yet another very profound discourse, but definitely a discourse towards divinity, which is going to give us the path of Bhakti Yoga. As we all know, one of the biggest misconceptions in today's field of yoga, world of yoga, has been that yoga is only limited to yogasanas and mere practical things, whereas yoga is a very broad and banyan tree under which there are many, many branches. In fact, each one of them contributing to the other and adding value to the other. And that is how in today's common yoga field, one of the missing component has been the path of devotion, the yoga of the emotions culture. It's a science of emotions culture rather. and that is the path of Bhakti Yoga. And so it's very apt that Indica Yoga, the global festival of yoga, would like to bring all aspects, all streams of yoga together here. And in this way, that today we are going to have a wonderful discourse by none other than Professor N.V. Raghuramji, who is a renowned scholar of yoga, a wonderful guide, a philosopher in yoga, who brings all aspects of yoga philosophy to the world. And friends, you all know that today, when the International Day of Yoga was proposed by the Prime Minister of India 6 years back in the UNO, immediately more than 177 countries agreed and sponsored this International Day of Yoga. If that had happened, definitely there had been the hard work of decades together of hard work, more than 4 decades of hard work, which Professor N.V. Raghuramji had done, taking yoga to all parts of the world. I would say there is no country where he had not stepped in and where he had not introduced yoga. There are many, many places where people would have those days heard first ever time the concept of yoga, the philosophy of yoga. It's only through the words of Sri Raghuramji, and they had all practiced it with him. So that is the wonderful contribution that he had made to the field of yoga. As we all know, Professor N.V. Raghuram is the spiritual head and the founder of Yoga Bharati, which is a worldwide organization spread over many countries and also in India. And also he had been one of the founding members of the Vivekananda Yoga Anusandhana Samsthana, the erstwhile Prashanti Kutiram. And even now, he travels worldwide to many places and leads people through his wonderful yoga discourses. He had been the personal yoga teacher to the first ever Indian astronaut, Sri Rakesh Sharma, and he had been instrumental in introducing yoga at even the White House in the USA and to many, many parts of the world. And he writes regularly wonderful articles on yoga philosophy, especially on Bhakti Yoga. It's very pleasant experience to hear, Bhakti Yoga, the heart, the yoga of the heart from Sri Raghuramji. And also, his whole family, as we know, Dr. Nagaratna Didi, who is a pioneer in the field of yoga therapy, his beloved wife, and his son, Dr. Amrit, is a scientist, a researcher in yoga. His daughter-in-law, Dr. Nidhi, is somebody who brings yoga to the women's wellness. So the entire family had been a yoga kutumbam, and he has not excluded his family only to the biological members of the family. Even we all feel that we are all his children, we are all the members of his family. So we are blessed to have Sri Professor N.V. Raghuramji, Yoga Sri Raghuramji here with us. And this is a wonderful morning we are going to have, starting with the science of Bhakti Yoga, the path of Bhakti Yoga by Professor N.V. Raghuramji. So once again, on account of the Global Festival of Yoga by Indica Yoga and all partnering organizations, I welcome you, Sri Raghuramji, and welcome all the delegates who have taken a wonderful keen interest in whatever different time zone. For some it is the morning, for some it is the evening or night, but everybody have taken keen interest and joined us. I welcome all the delegates also. So we will start with Sri Raghuramji's discourse, and at the end, if you have any questions, in fact, meanwhile, if you have any questions to ask Raghuramji, you can put it in the panel of the question and answer section, and I would ask all your questions to Sri Raghuramji at the end of the discourse. And I'm sure we are going to have a nice time. Namaste, Raghuramji.
Namaste, Subbuji. Nice to be with Indica Yoga and the team, sharing few ideas. The definition given to yoga by Patanjali, after going through the several thousands of years of yoga, part of this culture, Patanjali has given us the definition of yoga as the Chitta Vritti Nirodha, so that what happens is that when we do that, Tatha Drashtuhu Swarupe Avasthanam. It is see that I go back to myself, which is called as my Atmasthiti or Swarupa Sthiti. And this is what is the profound definition of yoga, which applies to any type of yoga that we are doing. And if we are not applying that principle on yoga to any yoga that we practice, it's not yoga. So therefore, basically taking this idea that why we have so many techniques of yoga? Because we have so many different ways of approaching towards the self. And the way that we approach the self with the help of discipline, and that's what is Raj Yoga. And with the help of your action that you are doing, and that's what is Karma Yoga. But ultimately the goal of any of these things is to reach the self. Similarly, we have a wonderful faculty called intellect, and we make use of this intellect, which has really helped us so much in the life. And that is what is called a Jnana Yoga. Apart from all these things, there is one more very important faculty of ours, personality of us. That's what is our emotions. And can we make use of this emotion to go back to our own self, our own Atmasthiti? And that's what is actually the Bhakti Yoga. In fact, unfortunately, what happened is that this emotions are much neglected aspect of it, because intellect becomes so powerful that people say intellectually we need to go, but keep the emotions aside, as if emotions are opposite to intellect. The most neglected aspect of it. But very interesting thing is that intellect is what we get much later. Emotions are what we are born with. Every child is an emotion. Intellect we acquire only when we are 7 or 8 years old. We start questioning, and then intellect develops. Now, every other yoga is a self-centered, that means to say self-centric yoga. Unfortunately, many people translate bhakti as God-centric yoga. It is not the self-centric yoga, but God-centric yoga. Then immediately when God-centric yoga it becomes, people who don't believe in God, or people don't have the kind of practice that we have in the Indian culture, many times people feel that Bhakti Yoga is not there, Bhakti Yoga is not for them. Therefore, yoga has been just limited to doing some physical practices, asanas, and then pranayama. Bhakti Yoga has been neglected. Another thing is, because of the intellect is so powerful, they said that people who are not really intellectual, they cannot cope up with all that. Let them do just dancing and singing and all those things. That's how basically Bhakti Yoga has been given a secondary rate treatment. But whereas what I feel that really with the spreading of yoga all over the world, most important thing is Bhakti Yoga, because the simple reason is that today what we have the problems with this is that, with the whole world is that so much of disharmony, so much of fighting, so much of violence that's going on. And it's all because that people are emotionally disturbed. So we don't have any training for emotions to take care of it. Unfortunately, to the whole education system focuses on the intellect so much, there is hardly any place for intellectual, emotional training. At least about 50, 60 years ago, when we were all students, there was some Shakespeare or some sonnet here and something like that in our education system. But today, it is not at all available. So therefore, basically, much more than any time else, today we really require the use of Bhakti Yoga, because it's something which takes care of our emotions. So coming back to the self, then what is this emotion? How does it take us towards that self? Let us try to inquire about it. And it's not what I'm talking about, it is what even the great sage who has really given us the treatise on Bhakti Yoga, it is Narada. He also gives this idea, and from that only I develop all this thinking process that is going on behind the Bhakti Yoga. Emotion is what we feel, intellect is what we think, and what we feel is close to our heart, what we think is at the intellect. But in the real life, what we feel is much more important than just what we think. Like the relationship between the parents and children is a feeling that is there. A good relationship between the teacher and student is the feel that is a teacher. So this idea of feeling is something which is everywhere, but then unfortunately that it is not been properly explored into it. So when we look at it, the child is born with the emotion called love. And that's what Narada picks up the definition of Bhakti Yoga, saying that the definition of Bhakti gives us, you have a wonderful feeling called as love you're born with. And enriched, ennoble love, that's what is called as Bhakti. Many times people think your love for God is Bhakti, is the way people translate it. But I had my own doubt about that, my own question about that. How can I love something which I don't even know? If you define the bhakti as love for God, immediately the question comes, show me God. I have to see God. Which God? Because there are so many hundreds and thousands of gods are there. So like that, all these things are there. Many times even this question also occurs, whether God really exists or not. Or the God that you think of is your own imagination. That means I know very well that my limited mind imagines something as God. Or maybe somebody fed me that idea that this fellow is God and that fellow is God. This God is like that God is like that. See, all these things are something which is not in something that I know. And if I want to learn something about it, I should go from what I know about. And what we know really is about love, because that we go through that experience. Look at the way 3-4 days child after the birth, in 3-4 days, looks at your face and smiles. I mean, why does the child smile? There is no reason actually, because the child is not a developed intellect. There is no reason behind it, but it is love that makes a child to smile. And you also smile at the child. When an adult smiles, you have to think of it. The child, it's pure love that makes a child to smile. Every child knows about this love. It goes through the experience of love. Not only one love, but you see several ways. Mother's love, father's love, brother's love, visitor's love, uncle's love. So like that, you see, in fact, that's why some author said very beautifully, he said, the child does not grow because of vitamins and nutrients, etc. Child grows because of love. And that you can see in the case of a very simple, poor little mother who is working as a laborer, to anybody, that this love is something which is very, not only human being has love, even the animals have love. In fact, Jagdish Chandra Bose said, even the plants love you. You touch the plants out of love, the plants respond to you. In fact, I come across in the gardens, places where people have put the placard saying that don't touch my plants, don't pluck flowers, very cruel. A friend of mine, he has a garden where he put the flags everywhere saying that, please touch my plant, they love your touch. What a wonderful way it is. Love is something that so wonderful, pleasant. And we all have that. As the animal has love, the plant has love, human being also has love. So love is something which is common to all of us. So what bhakti is that we know what love is. All that what I need to do is that how I have to ennoble it, enrich it. This is what Narada says as Parama Prema Rupa. So the whole discussion of bhakti is to see that how we can enrich or ennoble love. Now, and first of all, this love or the emotion that is there called love is something which is so extraordinary, because the simple reason is that this emotion called love, it can give us this is what Narada says, it gives us in touch with ourselves. Atmaramo bhavati, that's what he says. Before that, whatever that is supposed to be, the peace of mind, joy, blissful state, all that it gives us and then takes us to Atmarama Sthiti. That's what Narada gives us in his sutras, where he says the moment that when you are in the state of love, things look wonderful. Labdha puman siddho bhavati, trupto bhavati. The normal tripti, that is the sense of satisfaction that we have, it belongs to one sensory organ or the other. Like for example, I have a nice food, my sensory organ called as tongue has been satisfied. I'm thirsty, I'm getting water, it satisfies my thirst center. Whereas I'm tired, I want to sleep, and nice wonderful bed gives me a sleep center satisfaction. When we have all these things as the satisfaction at one center or the other, when you're in the state of love, the experience is like all the sensory organs put together, they're satisfied. You are quenched into the satisfaction. That's why trupto bhavati. And immediately followed by that, Narada gives a sutra saying that trupto bhavati atmaramo bhavati. That means to say you are now established in your state of atma or the self. In fact, when a particular sensory organ is satisfied, then you transcend that sensory organ. Like for example, you are thirsty and then you are given water. And once you are satisfied, you say, now no more water because that I've satisfied. I'm gone beyond that. Food also is like that. It helps you to transcend. Same way, when you are in the state of love, love belongs to the mind. And the moment that you are satisfied with that love, then it transcends. And when you transcend the mind, you are one with the self, That's what Patanjali gives us the definition. Tatha drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. When you chittavritti nirodha, the mind is quenched, and then what happens to you? We are established in the state of self, atmaram, atmasthiti. Now, with all the other techniques, so much difficult, it is so much of a journey. Whereas look at the way a simple stroke of love takes you to that atmasthiti. Therefore, of all the techniques of yoga, the way that I look at it is bhakti is something which is so extraordinary. There's another thing is that any trupti of mind, any satisfaction is always associated with that you don't want any more, anything like that. Like the way I said that your thirst center is satisfied, you don't want any more water. The same way that you don't want anything, you are so supremely satisfied. And that's what the example that's what the experience that you have. When you are in the state of love, you say that akinchit vanchati, you don't want anything. And you are ready to give. In the state of love, you're ready to give. And that's what is basically the way that it's recognized. When you meet somebody who you really love, you want to give something. You offer to give something. Otherwise, you feel miserable. And you again and again ask, what can I give you? What can I get you? It's so important. In fact, if I cannot give you anything, that I feel miserable in the state of love. I say, why should you feel miserable? You have something and you don't want to give. That's okay, fine. But love is not like that. If you can't give, you feel miserable. So all these experiences show, a Chinese proverb says, love is a language of the other world. The language of this world is, I get something, I get happiness. I am praised, I get happiness. I get something to eat or something to drink or something given to me. That gives me happiness. Whereas in love, give and get happiness. One of the great bhaktas, Tulsidas, says that if you can find happiness in giving, nobody can take away that happiness of yours. If you can give and get happiness, you are the richest person on this earth. So that means to say, the very practice of bhakti right from the beginning is something there where it is because based on love, then it is like celebration right from the beginning. It's not like other parts of the things. You are already in the godly experience and the state of love. That's why all other practices of yoga are supposed to be sadhana, whereas the bhakti is supposed to be upasana. The idea of upasana is that I am close to the divinity already. I am with the God already. This is another thing that normally what happens, we will heard that when you get defeated or you get something negative, but then whereas in love, it says that when you are in the state of love, your defeat itself gives you joy. That's what you see a mother, a father playing with the child, and then they are playing the wrestling. And then little child, 5-year-old child, he beats dad, puts him on the ground and sits on him, says that, wow, you see, I won. And look at the joy, not on the child, but on the face of the father. See, in defeat that he, there are some fathers are there, who don't want to that accept it. But then there are rare cases, let's not go for that. But in general, what happens is you really enjoy being defeated. And that's something which is not otherwise possible. And the same way that a teacher loves a student who defeats him in argument and logic, and he grows much better than him. Every sincere teacher who loves his students wishes that student goes bigger and bigger, much bigger and bigger. So therefore, basically, you see that the moment you are in the state of love, you give and get happiness, and there is something which is like that. I can tell you, go on telling again several examples like that, but the short of time, I would not get into all those details. But what cannot change, love can change you. That's another thing. Love is such a great power. We have not recognized that power, but love is that which can change the whole chemistry. And that's what we have seen in the life of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa Sharda Devi. Sharda Devi was first time going to Ramakrishna's place, and then she was going through the forest, young lady, not even 18 years, and then she was going through the forest. And then because she was sick, she slowed down. The rest of the group moved ahead. And by the time it was already dark, she and her uncle were walking in the forest all alone. At that time, a thunderous voice of a dacoit shouted, who is walking in the forest? Uncle was completely unnerved. And then whereas Sharda Devi composed herself, she was also like that, but she composed herself. And with a sweet, gentle voice, she said, Father, my name is Sharda. The word that she said, Father, that really touched his heart. Because, a dacoit is somebody, nobody calls him as father. Even his own children might not call him as father. Whereas somebody calls him as father, it just touches core of his heart, and then it evoked that love. And, at once melted. He said, why are you walking in the forest? Just imagine, any dacoit will ask that question, but look at the transformation that has taken place. She said, I'm going to my husband's place, and then I was sick, therefore I got stranded. Immediately, the dacoit and his wife, they brought her to their home and then served her in such a way by next day, she recovered. Whole night they were nursing her. See, the transformation has occurred because of one simple word. She said, Father. That's a very simple, common expression. And next day, the dacoit goes all the way to Ramakrishna Paramahamsa's place and handed over Sharda Devi to him, and then comes back. What a transformation that love can do it. If only that we have the faith in love, we can do that. Love is manifest in several ways, like the way love is like the sunlight, and the sunlight goes through the prism, gives so many different colors. The same way that our own love that is there within us, we are born with that love. It manifests in the form of various colors. When it goes to the elders, the same love becomes like Shraddha. The same love, when it goes through the prism of different colors, it manifests in the form of Vatsalya, that is your love for the child. The same love manifests as a sense of wonder when you see something which is beautiful. In all these cases, you see that your intellect stops. You go far beyond the level of intellect. You are one with yourself. So all these different ways that love can manifest, it manifests in the form of charity. It manifests in the form of compassion when you see somebody sick. So like that, all these things are different aspects of our beautiful experience called love. And every time that any of these experiences, it transports you to become one with the self. Nakinchit vanchati, you don't want anything. In fact, I have examples to show that when somebody is in that state of love or that compassion, it says that I don't even want the highest goal, that Brahma Prapti or Atma Prapti or anything, that I'm satisfied. That means to say this is more achieving, more satisfying than the highest goal in spirituality. That's why basically the idea of love is so extraordinary, and we're all born with that. In fact, all these things, what I said, love, compassion, and friendliness, all these things are supposed to be the divine qualities within us. God is not just God, but the God is his the godly qualities. And we all have that. This is what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Daivi Sampat, we all have it. All these godly qualities are there. And if you find out a God who does not manifest any of all these qualities, how can you consider him as like God? It is like the way that somebody shows a dark mass in the sky, which has got no radiance, and then say, this is what his sun has got trillions of calories of energy. I said, it doesn't matter, because what has to manifest? Similarly, a godly person is somebody who has to manifest those godly qualities. So this feeling that we all have it. But then what happens is that we also have the negative emotions, anger, hatred, jealousy. Why don't you consider them? They are not original qualities with us. They are not natural with us. They are unnatural. And actually, they're all not born out of nature, from the Brahmasthiti, from Atmasthiti, but they are born out of our ego. Look at the simple thing that you love somebody. Love is something which is expanding. Love is something which is all-pervading. But then the moment that ego enters into that, then the love becomes a lust. Then it brings you down. You become materialistic level. The moment you come down to materialistic level, you would like to possess. You would like to have it. You would like to destroy it. Whereas in love, you don't want to destroy it. Similarly, compassion is something which is divine. But the moment ego enters into it, then it becomes like a complaint. And the moment again it becomes like a complaint, then you hate the world, you hate this, you hate that. So love, compassion, these things are the positive qualities of love, of emotions, whereas the negative emotions, anger, hatred, jealousy, greed, possession. As I said earlier, that in love you give, whereas possession becomes the opposite of it. And all these things enter because of your love. I is there, therefore the possession comes. I is there, therefore I want to destroy. I is there, therefore that jealousy enters into it. The culprit is not your emotions. And unfortunately, what happens? Because these negative emotions come up, then you blame the love itself. You blame emotions itself is bad. And therefore, today what happened is that people have set aside emotions, saying that you do not progress with these emotions. But then unfortunately, the culprit is what is that ego. Therefore, the real bhakti sadhana, or what is called as enriched, ennobled love, what Narada gives us in the form of bhakti is that it has dissolved this ego. Therefore, some author said very beautifully, he said, bhakti is not to find God. Bhakti is to dissolve yourself. When you are not there, what else is there in this creation? Is it not the divinity that is there all around you? Unfortunately, what happened that we cannot see the divinity because we are seeing the world through our own veil called as ego. Dissolve this ego, then you can see the world as a divinity. That's why Sant Kabir said very beautifully, I was searching for you, God, hills and forests, rivers and mountains, meadows and greens, I never found God. Today God is searching, where are you, Kabir? Kabir is not there. All that what you have is the divinity. So therefore, as long as the Kabir is there, you cannot find God. But the moment Kabir is dissolved, all that what you see is nothing but divinity. So therefore, the godliness is an experience. And this has been said by several of our sages. Like for example, Ishavasya Upanishad, one of the foremost of the Upanishads, when the Rishi, there he says that Ishavasya midam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat. That means to say the whole world is nothing but divinity. He is not trying to convince you. He is not trying to bring about a logic to convey to you. But he is actually out of ecstasy, he is expressing himself. It is like the way flower flowers. When the plant is full, complete, that completeness, fullness is manifested in the form of a flower, in the form of a fruit. And that's what is the way that expression comes up. Bhakti, therefore, is a celebration. That is what it says, that you surrender yourself. But normally what happens is very difficult for us to surrender our ego. Because the moment that we think that I surrender our ego, somebody can walk over me, somebody can stamp on me. Therefore, we are afraid of surrendering. And on the other hand, we say that, no, I don't want to surrender. You surrender first. And you know what happens? The other person is also ego. He says that you surrender. Wife wants husband to surrender by, husband wants to wife to surrender by his power. Wife is also smart. She wants husband to surrender by her tears. Anyway, everybody is waiting for surrender to somebody else. But then it is difficult to the human being. Therefore, people have the pet dog or a cat, so that the dog or a cat will listen to you, surrender to you. You want to make them to sit down, they sit down. Give a shake hand, they give shake hand. So you are happy because at least the dog surrendered to you. But soon you realize that it is not the dog surrender to you. You surrender to the dog. The dog has to go for a morning walk. You have to take her. Whether it is sun, rain, or snow, you cannot escape. And you, wherever you go, you have to come back home because that you have to feed the dog. Look at the way. Though the leash is there in the neck of the dog, it is in your hands. But wherever dog takes you, you have to go. So therefore, basically, you have surrendered yourself. A simple idea is that therefore, we have imagination. You surrender yourself to the God. Therefore, the God is nothing but an idea for which that you surrender. God is supposed to be all these godly qualities that are there, immensely merciful, immensely compassionate. And these are the things which make a person as a God. It may be a person who rises to that level. And that's why you see that kind of stories that are there about Rama, Krishna, all those things. Why we consider them a God? Because that they have small little quality of divinity that we have. They have shown it in abundance. In fact, what is so simple? like a candle light that we have, it is called a candle. There is a billion, zillion candle lights is what we call it a sun god. In fact, in Sanskrit, God means Divya. Divya means that which is multiplied by a zillion times. My compassion is a little, but then I can see that Rama's compassion is something which is extraordinary, beyond all the boundaries. Therefore, Rama becomes like God for me. It is for me, my personal choice, deep inside my heart. And then I surrendered myself to that God within me. It's not for the exhibition's sake outside. It's not for outside. It is for my to feel surrender that ego. When I surrender this ego, then I can look at the world as divinity. Then the transaction with the world completely changes. Because I don't have hatred, I don't have jealousy, I don't have anything with this world. And all that I have with this world is compassion, love. This transformation occurs because that I surrendered myself. There is nothing that I need to pursue. This is the idea of bhakti, and these are the bhakti sadhanas. He says that you go to the temple, the puja is not important. The way that you worship this and that, they are not important. But what is behind this puja or the worship that is there is the feeling of love, a surrender out of love. That's what is important. Puja dishu anuragayiti. That's what is the way that Narada describes about the practices of it. And look at the way that when you surrender your ego, then all inhibitions drop down, and then you sing, you dance, as if that you are not bound by anything the total freedom that is there. So therefore, the surrendering of the ego is something which is very important. Dissolving the ego is very important. All other parts I said is sadhana because that we need to achieve. And here, there is nothing like sadhana. You don't have to achieve. On the other hand, you dissolve yourself. And when you dissolve yourself, all alone, all that it is there, you are being with the God. The moment you surrender that ego, you are being with the God. And being in connection with the God or in the association with the God is the meaning of upasana. Upasana is such a beautiful word. You are in the state of godliness rather than you are doing anything. Similarly, like that, you look at all these books, texts that are there, all this literature that is there about various gods, east or west or north or south, you have such wonderful literature anywhere in the world. And there, don't look at what are the characters, what is the history, geography. What is more important is the love aspect of it, how they manifest that love aspect of it in these scriptures. When you look at that, that is something which elevates you. So that makes you to a different human being, saying that if somebody else can practice that kind of a love, that kind of a compassion, can I not also live that way? It fulfills you. So this is what another method of sadhana and bhakti. In other techniques of yoga that you do the asana, you do the practice of pranayama, you do so many things, you sit down, meditate and all those things. But bhakti sadhana really involves in trying to, as much as possible, live the state of love and compassion in your day-to-day life, and in your day-to-day life, dissolve this ego. That's what is the method of sadhana. That's why Narada gives the second sutra, Kathadishiti Gargaha. Garga Rishi says that in all these stories and then Puranas and then all these things that are there, look at the aspect of love that flows behind all these characters that are there. Let me give one small little example from Ramayana. I know that there are people from all over the world who are joining this particular thing. They may not know details about Ramayana, but I just give a small little background behind I go to the real story of it. Rama was a great king, existed about 6,700 years ago in this country, and very honest, sincere, and somebody who has upheld and the dharma, the righteousness of the world. And he was about to be coronated. His father was wanting to coronate him. At that time, stepmother, mind was poisoned by her own servant, supposed to be Manthara. Actually, in the beginning, right from the beginning, Manthara was taking care of Rama as a child. And she was like a fourth mother for Rama. There were three other mothers were there, and Manthara was the fourth mother. And then she poisoned the minds of his stepmother. And then as a result of it, the stepmother asked Dad that you have to send Rama for 14 years to the forest. Dad was not really willing to do that because he loves his son so much. Rama, when he was asked, Rama, would you like to go to, this is what is the demand, your father? Rama right away at once accept, what is this? If dad wants me to go to the forest, I'll go to the forest. Without any wink of an eye, he just agreed. He went to the forest. 14 years he was there. And meanwhile, his father died. And then everybody blamed his stepmother and her servant. Naturally, that's what happens. Not only that, she was also stricken with the grief. Why did you do all these things? Because of which, Rama had to go to the forest and the kingdom is that the father died and so many things that happened. The whole kingdom lost this joy in the kingdom. All that was there. But anyway, 14 years later, Rama comes back. It was a great jubilation of the whole country. Everybody is in a festive mood for a month-long festival that goes on. And everything subsides and every activity is going on normally. At that point of time, Rama alone was walking around the palace without anybody's help. And then he comes to a door which he found that it is not opened for ages. So he just tried to push the door open. It was hard. But when he tried to open the door from inside, the voice comes to him saying that, please don't open the door. Rama says, why? And then that lady's voice from inside says that, why do you want to open the door? And Rama replies saying that, I want the sun to come in. And then he opened the door and he finds Manthara there, his, stepmother's servant, and she was there crying. And then Rama says that, look, my dear mother, everybody deserves, sun shines for everybody and everybody deserves it. So you also deserve it. And then she cries and says to Rama, what, Rama, don't you hate me? I did all these things, for 14 years sent to the forest and all this suffering that you went through, and still you like me? Rama says, when I left Ayodhya 14 years back, I left 4 mothers behind. Today when I came back, I saw only 3 mothers. And I couldn't ask anybody, where is this 4th one? Because I know very well that everybody hates you. I was silently searching for you. I'm so glad today I found you. I'm so happy because I found the 4th mother. And then she says, why do you still like me? All these things I've done. Rama says to Manthara, you don't know what nice things happened in this 14 years. In fact, a king's kingdom also includes all this forest. And I would not have had an opportunity to go to the forest otherwise. This is a good opportunity, golden opportunity. For 17 years, for 14 years, I went to the forest and I vanquished so many demons that were there and so many saints who were sitting and meditating. I made their life peaceful and happy. And I killed so many great demons that were there, so much of all those things that were happening. I removed all those things. And in order to do that, I had to go to the forest. And if I have to go to the forest, there should be some story behind it. And every story has to have a villain. And then God chose you to be villain. Who can be really villain, particularly in this story of Ramayana? Who would like to be villain? And you acted to be villain. So I have a greater respect for you than earlier. See, look at the way that Rama could not only pardon her, but could appreciate her and her effort that was there. When you read the story, when you look at that Ramayana, this story, this feeling of pardon, this feeling of forgiveness, hovers in you for hours together, days together, months together. Not only that, that's why this story of Rama has become an eternal story in this culture, because people get really motivated by that. This is what is said, when you have these godly qualities like compassion, like forgiveness, all these things, that means you become one with the God. That's what Jesus Christ also said. When he was being crucified, the first reaction that came from him is, why me? Because I have not done anything wrong. The others have done wrong, because the others were who was being crucified along with him. They did something wrong, but I have not done anything. He had a complaint. But the next moment, Suddenly the change occurred in him. He said, forgive them, O Lord. They don't know what they are doing. It's not their fault. The moment that forgiveness came in him, that's when he became Son of God. It is said, until that time he was Son of Mary, but the next moment he was Son of God. Son of Mary, Mary is the physical mother. Son of Mary is that you are identified with the physical body. Son of God is you are identifying yourself with the consciousness deep within. So we are a spectrum. At one end that we are the physical body, at the other end we are the consciousness. It's up to us whether we identify ourselves with the physical body, which has the boundaries, which has the rigidities, which has all these ideas of I hate it, I like it, I want this, I don't want this kind of a thing, or identify myself with that spiritual being, the consciousness where I don't have any more boundaries, I become one with the divine. So therefore, basically, as Sri Aurobindo said it, this Bhakti Yoga is essentially a journey which takes us from ordinary human being to a great human being, to the divine human being, to the divinity. You become one with the God. All other techniques you still want to achieve something, whereas in Bhakti, you yourself become God. There is a question of achieving something. That's why Bhakti is not sadhana, but it is a vipassana, it is being there. Today, what happened is that this God image, minus the aspect of bhakti, minus the aspect of love, the God image became like a religion. So therefore that it divided people. You see, people are divided against God. My God is better than your God. How silly it is, I can see that when this material image becomes very important, or the concept of God and the material image becomes important. Somebody I met who came all the way to South India from North India, and he said, in Udupi, one of the great places in South India, great Krishna temple, he said, I don't know what is this Krishna they call him. I don't accept it. He was a big person from the point of view of the spirituality, was a great spiritual leader. He was saying that, look at the way in North India, you see the Krishna, they made out of marble, white Krishna, beautiful flute in his hand, all those things. Whereas here in South India, the practices we make the images out of granite. I said, what is this? Black Krishna. Oh, I don't like this Krishna. Whereas somebody in the South India went all the way to North India, came back. Yeah, I went to Vrindavan, everything is fine, there are people and all that. But only thing is, I don't know why that Krishna is so white. He's like, he doesn't have any, red blood cells in his body. Look at the way that, how we attach to the physical body rather than the spirituality behind it. So this is what, God is not important. Godliness is what is important. The puja, the God and temple, all those things are like the base. But then what is more important is your flow of love, your connection with love, that's important. Even though we have God, we have one more concept that is there. God is there for me to surrender so that God doesn't harm me, doesn't disturb me. So we go to the God out of fear. As long as you go to the God out of fear, God is like a handyman for you. It's not like that you really believe in God. You go to the God because that you should be saved. You are important. God is not important. If God does something for you, then He is God. If He does not do something for you, you threaten God that, look, I'm not going to go with you, I go with somebody else. When you go to the God out of love, you are not important. God is important. When you are not important, God is important, then that helps you to surrender. So therefore, surrender out of love, not surrender out of fear. As long as that you surrender out of fear, you create religion. Whereas the moment that you surrender out of love, then you create spirituality. What really world requires is not all these religions. We have had enough play of these religions, enough violence of these religions, blood bath out of these religions. Now we transcend about that. We have come to yoga. Yoga became a worldwide tool, and most important tool, part of this tool is that it takes you above the words of religion, takes towards spirituality, where we hug each other, we admit each other, accept each other. We can create an extraordinary, wonderful world. And that's what is the purpose of Bhakti Yoga. Today, as Subbuji was telling, that worldwide that yoga has spread. People are doing asanas, pranayama all over the world. I wish that at least all these yoga practitioners bring about a glimpses of this bhakti yoga into their way of life. Probably we create an extraordinarily wonderful world, planet Earth, where every moment, every day is nothing but celebration. And that celebration is the spirituality. That celebration is yoga. That celebration is what is the essence of mankind. Let's go with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Raghuramji. That was so wonderful. We feel like hearing more and more of this beautiful divine pour of love that has come straight away from not from your mouth, but from your heart. And as Sri Debra Huber, one of the attendees here today, out of all the more than 125 participants in the Zoom. So she says, you know, never have I heard in my 6 decades such beautiful story and discourse, meaning unfolded. I was reluctant this morning. I was reluctant this morning, but I was pulled to listen. Thank you is what the feedback that Debra had given. And there are wonderful feedbacks which are just, you know, flowing in. And I'm sure people definitely experienced, not just heard. It was not just Shravana, but Anubhava. It was definitely an experience. So with this, once again, we will we'll look into some of the questions, Raghuramji, which are there. And I'm sure they are going to benefit a lot by hearing your questions, by hearing your answers. I'm sorry. So one is Jane had asked a question, how to find the divine insight even you don't hold any religion. I think you have already answered that, but still if you want to elaborate on that, how to find divine insight even you don't hold any religions.
Even you don't?
Hold to any religion.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Actually, if you don't hold to any religion, then you can really hold on to the divinity. Look at the way mother does not have any religion for the child. Child absolutely does not know anything about the love, about the religion. But then look at the love. My pet dog loves me much more than anybody else. In fact, the dog does not know anything, does not value anything. You know, the dog loves me unconditionally. So that's what is the divinity I can say. Every time that I come home from outside, particularly, you know, 2-3 days gap when I come home, wow, look at the way that the dog, actually, you know, my dog, it is not the dog wags the tail, it's the tail wags the dog. It is like that, so much of love. This is what you can see all over the nature that is there. And this, if we can recognize that, then we don't require the religions. We should rise above the level of religion. And it doesn't even require a theist or atheist, and all these discussions also do not agree with that. I can see the God in dog. I can see the God in the pet animal that I have, that is there. And these days in YouTube, you come across so many such wonderful things. Like, for example, it's about a turkey. A small little boy was there, and then for the sake of, you know, the Bakrid or something like that, the dad bought a goat, brought home, and then on the Bakrid day, he wanted to sacrifice the goat. But this little child, full of tears, hugging that goat and said, please don't hurt him, don't leave him, like that. And finally, father had to give up that idea. See, what religion, what is there in that? In fact, if you think of Bakrid, then that is what is religion. Rise above the level of religion to spirituality. Then I bow down in front of that child.
Wonderful, Raghuramji. I think it was very apt. And we have another, you know, kind of sharing and also a question from Dr. Jayaprakash Gupta, one of the very active participant in all these sessions in the Indica Yoga's Global Festival of Yoga, where he says, love is the limbic system function, and evolution has taken man to precortex higher functioning. Would it be right to say Jnana Yogi is devoid of love? We have to realize that intellect without emotion is not possible.
it's in the modern evolution theory that it is a limbic system and all those things, and then lymphic system that evolved. But the Indian philosophy says that consciousness-based universe. That means our basic universe, nature itself is consciousness from which everything has come. But that besides is a different definition, the different discussion that is there. But very important thing is we don't deny the intellect at all. In fact, when I can respect everything in this world, I should respect the intellect also much more. That's what Ramakrishna respects the intellect so much that when Keshav came and argued with Ramakrishna, God does not exist. Ramakrishna gave him a big hug and he was in ecstasy. He said, but for God, nobody would have created such an intellect like you are. See? So essentially what happens is, we know that if you look at your whole intellect, it is nothing about the world outside. So for me to feel inside, I require the emotion. But for my execution with the outside, to execute in the world outside, I follow the intellect. So I don't want to disrespect the intellect, but where I have to use the intellect, I use the intellect outside. Like for example, I love my child extremely. There is nothing which stops me from my love. But then when the child says that I want to have this, then I use my discrimination outside. And I say that you cannot have it. But then if I'm also with love and I use the intellect, then I see that how I advise a child not to go for that, but at the same time, I see that child is not also hurt. It's a great art. And you know, this great art, every mother knows about it. Every father does not know it, but the mother knows about it. That's why I say that love belongs to the feminine. How to handle it?
Very nice. Actually, you were quoting from the Narada Bhakti Sutra.
Yeah.
Here also, Narada brings the example of the gopis of Vrindavan. Yatha Vrajagopika Nam. He did not say all the male characters.
Yatha Vrajagopika
Nam.
Wow.
So it's very nice to say love is feminine. I'm sure that many of the participants here are definitely the feminine Shakti who are here. And one more question which comes from, I think, one such feminine Shakti who has wonderful bhakti in her, Anju Lal, who was asking, how do you find love when sometimes it feels we are living in a whirlpool of hate?
Yeah.
I live in a religion-based sensitive area and it gets tough. I think for many people, especially in our Indian scenario, this is there, Raghuramji. So what would you like to say?
So that is where we need to, the real satsanga, as the way that yoga says, is a satsanga which constantly, continuously gives us the touch with this kind of thing and this kind of message. So that's what is basically the way that the satsanga goes. And that goes in a long way to develop this aspect of it. Yeah, and that is the reason why Narada in his sutra says that Tad virodeshu udasena taja. Yeah, just leave it alone that the world has so many things. And then you can separate it out and go ahead in the right direction. Tad virodeshu udasena taja. That's what it says. And Krishna also in the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, he says, Adveshta sarva bhutanam, maitrihi karuna yevacha, nirmamo nirahankara. That is the best way that you practice it.
Very nice. Also, Dr. Namrata Reddy, who is also a very regular attendee in all our sessions, had mentioned, or rather asked, single word on how to find love within us, special in crisis, not to take a drastic steps of ending one's life.
Wow.
So I think that is what bhakti is, that single word on how to find love within in us, especially in crisis, and not to take a drastic step towards ending the life. And let me look for some more. Of course, there are many. I think you have already answered. Some of the questions were answered in due course of your discourse. So I think, yeah, there is one question here.
You know, I'd like to reflect
Please.
on that particular thing. The moment that you say deep inside that divinity was created, you know, you never thought that you should be born. One day that you find that you are here. He led his life, where to be born, how to go ahead, and so many things that happened. Your good decisions, bad decisions, they're all his. Okay. So he is deep inside, resting in your heart. So one who has given you life, it is he who takes your life also. It's not you to decide about those things. When I'm not there, who am I to decide about those things? I always live myself in the feeling that in the grace of God. That's what, as long as that I live. And beyond that also. The simple idea is that after all this body has comes and goes, I'm somebody behind all those things with all those things and who does not undergo any change. This is what in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives. See, this journey the body is going through, but then I'm there behind it constant. And that constant is me. And who goes with the divinity? Yeah.
Wonderful. And here we have another question. Sri Ramohan Namile has asked us, bhakti is about the divine moods and rasa. So we cannot sometimes stay in the same mood or rasa for a longer time. So can we shift across the rasas and bhakti? How can we see this? Is his question.
What is that?
No, his question is, can we shift across the different modes of bhakti, like bhavas which are there? I think
Oh, yeah.
the rasas, he is mentioned as a rasa, the madhurya rasa or
Yes.
vatsalya and
In
sakya.
fact, in the Taittiriya Upanishad, it says that rasovaisaha,
Vaisaha.
the rasa itself is the divinity. So change from one rasa to that way makes the life. It's God's garden has variety of flowers. Let's enjoy all those things. They're all part of it. And particularly when you are surrendered to God, these rasas, particularly when you're angry, when you're you don't like God, I'll say all those things. They're so beautiful. They're so it's like the way a child playing with the mother that, look, you don't touch me, you go, I walk myself. Wow, how nice it is. That's what it's doing.
I think in people like Ramakrishna Paramhamsa, he had a switching over of all these rasas. He felt like sometime a friend, sometime a child, sometime a beloved. Yes. So it's all about experiencing the connection, but not what form or how. It's not important, but the divine connection is very important. Thank you so much, Raghuramji. I think we still have an endless thing of appreciations. Today I see more than the questions, it's more of the feeling, the emotions that they have felt connected to the sweet discourse that you had given on Bhakti. So we have wonderful things, especially people appreciating the contemporary relevant examples. As you rightly said, it's not about God, but about our life. It's about we. So the contemporary examples that you had given, especially God in dog. So it's just a spelling change, but it is the same. So that many have also appreciated and wonderful things. So before we go to the end of the session where Raghuramji is going to conclude giving his message, the contemporary, the conclusive message for him for all of us to take ahead as the end of the session, and that sums up the entire journey in yoga as such, especially today. I think it's a day of Bhakti Yoga, the day of surrender, that we see all the sessions which are aligned to this wonderful flow of thoughts which Raghuramji has started in this beautiful morning. And I think that was a wonderful presentation that we saw also, that as we saw in this dance, if there is a true bhakti, then one is ready to face all hardships with a smile. And because one trusts that there is light at the end of the tunnel and we all be protected. And Raghuramji, so we are so happy and glad that you had been with us, adding a wonderful dimension of Bhakti Yoga, which is most important, most fundamental. I think Bhakti is that which connects with all other streams of yoga. That even in Ashtanga Yoga, we see that the aspect of Ishvara Pranidhana, which is surrendering to the divine, is there. Even in Jnana Yoga, you start by surrendering to the Guru, looking at Guru as the divine presence. Tad Vidhi Pranipadena. So Karma Yoga is also ultimately surrendering one's ego to the divine and going in the path of divinity. I think wonderfully you summed up, within this short time, brought a beautiful dimension of Bhakti Yoga. And friends, so that was an excellent thing. We had almost 125, since we started almost until now, 125 participants throughout the session, attending from all parts of the world. We had many international friends and also many friends from India. And in the Facebook Live also, we had not less than hundreds who have joined. In fact, it was shared in many forums in Facebook. And one of the Facebook Live, I was seeing many senior yoga teachers. Sri Ragish was there with us, Ravendra Pai, Rajendra, and many senior yoga teachers were also following. Ashok and all were following this wonderful presentation of Raghuramji. Raghuramji was quoting Kabir a lot. So, Kabir sings in the end, कहत कबीरा अनुभवनी का जो देखो वो राम सरी का. So it's the anubhava which is important, and that's what Raghuramji gave us in a beautiful way. And he rightly said, Bhakti is celebration. Bhakti is not just a sadhana, but it is upasana. It's a celebration. And for a true bhakta, every day is Deepavali, every day is New Year, every day is a celebration, because we are in the presence of the divine. As Purandaradasa says, Indina dinave shubhadinavu. Every day is that celebration. And that's what Shankaracharya even sings, Nandati, Nandati, Nandatyeva. Bhakti is that Swarupa Anusandana, and that's what Raghuramji, it's not God-centric, but it is, the devotee-centric, wonderful here that he brought. And thank you so much, Raghuramji, for these wonderful insights. Before we end with your last concluding message, I request Srinivasji to put up the next session for today. And as I announced, the next sessions for today in the afternoon, we are going to have between 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. We're going to have Vinyasa for spinal flexibility, which is Mrinalini Madhukar, who is a co-founder of Ayana Yoga Academy, one of the most accomplished teachers, along with Ragish. She is taking the beautiful path in yoga. Ayana Yoga Academy. Mrinalini is going to present us on Vinyasa for spinal flexibility. I think it's going to be more to practice also. So in Bhakti, it is surrender. So when you surrender, so that's what Vinyasa is taking us through this wonderful session. And also in the night, between 7 to 8 p.m. in the evening, we are going to have James Bogue, again, a wonderful renowned yoga teacher who is going to bring us the beautiful dimension of earth and sun gratitude meditation. Bhakti is all about our gratitude to the divine, what we have got. And definitely sun and the earth are the beautiful divine dimensions through which we are connected. I think somewhere we can feel divinity more closer to us. It is Bhumi, it is the earth, and Surya, and both of them have a great role to play in the tradition of yoga also. And it's going to be an excellent experiential session with James Bogue on earth and sun gratitude meditation. So stay back with us for the whole day and for the rest of the days to go. And thank you all so much. And Raghuramji, finally, we want to hear your final concluding message with which we can take home, we can go back home, experiencing Bhakti all in our today's life.
So particularly today, it is much more important about this understanding and practicing of Bhakti, because there is so much of an onslaught of intellect in the way of the development in the world outside. In the process, we can easily get caught up in the material world with all the technology development, with all the intellectual development. So it is necessary that we need to get out of this particular clutches of the external world, material world, and something that we can go deep into ourselves. Any amount of development in the external world is like skin deep. And what is that you want to go to the consciousness or the spirituality? It is what Bhakti can help us. So therefore, let us try to take this message forward. And as I said, that it is not something that you have to sit and do it on a mat or something like that. It's something which you can practice throughout the day. So that's why the message of Bhakti is something which is more relevant today than any time else. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Raghuramji. With all our humble pranams to you from the team of Indica Yoga, the Global Festival of Yoga. You have always been our mentor, a guide. It was a pleasure listening to you. And I thank all the other team members and also the volunteers and all the delegates who have joined us early in the morning. So without missing any session, they have been sincerely practicing, following with us. Many have shared. It's a beautiful anubhava, an experience that we got today. And I'm sure we're going to carry and retain this. With this, we will conclude with the Bhakti clap. I request all of you to rise your hands up and we do a Bhakti clap and then we conclude the session. Thank you, Raghuramji. Namaste. Dhanyavad.